Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to WX Live webinar number 155. Today is going to be Jeff Graham showing his PC soft replication presentation, and today is Friday, July the 3rd, 2015. And thank everybody for coming out today. A lot of businesses are closed, but a number of you are showing up this morning to get some good teaching from Jeff. So it's all yours, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Tim. It's an interesting subject, PC soft replication. For those that were at DevCon last year, Fabrice went through several presentations for creating an open source replication. And part of that is because with PC soft replication, you're talking about a bit of kind of black magic. And it comes in several flavors. And this is right out of the help. The old logged replication is kind of a legacy thing, and it only works as Hyperfile Classic, and we're not going to even talk about that much. I don't think anyone really would use it. And then the replication of Hyperfile servers, I think, was introduced in 19, and PC Soft did a presentation on that subject. So you can always look at that webinar. So what we're going to look at is the universal replication, and that, interestingly, will also work with other what they call heterogeneous databases. I'm not sure which ones those are. They mention Oracle, but I'm only working with the Hyperfile part. So universal replication has several flavors of that. The universal replication, not the assisted universal replication, just sends files between a master and subscriber, and then they apply those files and then send back any changes. And there is an example with WinDev for that, and we'll look at it right quick. I'm trying to get a blank screen here. Well, let's just bring it on top then. Right, here's the example in WinDev. So we're resetting the data here, and it tells you, about how it's done and so forth, and you can look at that anytime. But the key thing is that you have a set of data that's one database has, and then you transmit a replica to the subscriber database, and then you retrieve that replica from and apply it, and when you look at the data, it's over there. You can modify this data and save that and close, and then you transmit that, create another replica, and over here you retrieve it and synchronize, and when you look at the data, it should be modified, and it is. So that's really for two databases which have no internet connection or no live way, and that's so you can look at the example if you're interested in that. So what we're going to concentrate on is assisted universal replication, and there's two different versions of that. There's the automatic replication, and before preparing for this presentation, I never tried to use automatic replication. So since I had an extra week, to prepare, I thought, well, I'll just try that. And I didn't get everything to work, but because there are some definite restrictions if you use automatic replication. But the key to automatic and the programming version of assisted universal replication, the key to them is the Repli edit function. So let's look at that. So you have to have what right here is a .wer file, and that's created by Repli edit. And if you have WinDev installed and you double click on it, you get the Repli editor for that file. And this is, I have for this demonstration, a single file database, and that's called test data, and it's in a database called PCSoft on the server with just generated data. And let's just look at that real quick. Okay, this is the data in that file. They're just some meaningless test values, but the key thing I wanted to show was how the filters work, because usually your master database has a lot more data than you need on your handheld device, and so you can use the filter to reduce the amount of data that gets replicated on your handheld device or a remote application. So we'll look at how that works. Now, the interesting thing that I found is in the automatic replication, I could find no way to pass a parameter saying what the filter is. So it had to be hard-coded into the data. And you can see there's a modified on less than June 1st of this year. Now, you can look at this and see all the different options, but you have a basic this is the default basically for the replication, and that is that it's bidirectional and the most recent has priority. Now, on some files you would have only toward this subscriber. I never had a need for toward the master only. And then you define your parameters in here, and the master file, and it is the PCSoft in Hyperfile Control Center. Now, if you look at the Repli edit for the data files, then this is where you can either load the data from an analysis, or you can load the data from your client server when you're creating a new .wer file. So that gives you just an idea, and we'll look at one that's more extensive later. But there is, to create an application that has automatic replication, during your setup procedure, there is an option that says install the tools for replication. If you check that box, what it does, you have to have a .wer file next to your executable that's the executable name for the demo. And it also installs this Repli admin application, and that's how you control the synchronization and automatic replication. And then it puts in some other files. And this is the file that once you install it and tell the system that this application has active replication on this machine, it creates this file. And we can just look at it real quick. And that's how it knows that replication is set up. And that's where they store all the parameters. So let's look at, oh, by the way, they also install a help file, but there's one problem with it. You need to be very efficient in French, because all their documentation for replication help file is still French. Now, I've got this running here, and let's kind of look at it. So it's a very simple little application. It just has a table in it, and it's set right now in the I'm going to try and explain this clearly here. This is the Repli admin, and we added this application, this demo, to the admin. And now the state, you notice it says initialized. Now if you change this, click on this icon here, it changes it to direct connection. Once you're in direct connection, you're working with the master database, and it then disables all the filters, and you actually see all the data. And we'll look at that in a moment, but we'll go back to the modified state here. Now if you remember, the filter says that it does not have any data after June 1st. And I did that because the other demo has only the data after June 1st, and then you can change that date. So now if we go in and change the value here, so we put a huge value so we can see it. And then that, of course, does not, if we refresh over here, that change is not in this record. But if we go over here to the admin and say, well, we finished our work, we're ready to synchronize, you just click on the synchronize and then a refresh over here, and it should be there. You see the data shows up on the Hyperfile Control Center. So now if we go in and change the modified date on this one and put it to June 4th and save that, and we replicate again, and we refresh the table, it should change from 49 to 48. And of course it did not. Let's do this one more time. Oh, it changed the date here. So refreshing the tables, now it went and refreshed from the synchronization. So I think the first synchronization went to the master, and then the second one came back to the thing. And like I say, I've never really used automatic replication, but it shows that it does work. And there's disadvantages to it. One of the things, for example, is that you cannot use H-change connection and so forth. So let's go to the next line here. So these are some of the points that I just covered, and it will be, you can refer them easier by reading this slide if you want to review it later. But the another irritating thing is that I could not get the replication to work in test mode no matter what I did. There probably is. And their documentation says that you can I didn't want to do that. You can make it where it automatically syncs when you start up the application or when you exit the application. And I could not get that to work. I'm sure there's some setting I had somewhere that did not work. And part of the confusion with automatic universal replication is that there are 3 ways, at least, if not more, to specify how the replication works. You can do it in the setup, you can do it when you install, or you can do it dynamic like some way. And I just did not play around with it that much. So what we really want to concentrate in, and what I think is the most useful part of replication, is the assisted universal replication by programming. This requires 4 commands that are listed there. And again, replic edit is the one that you define what data and how to replicate. And in the final demo that we'll cover today, we show I've got multiple data files out of the analysis that get replicated to a handheld. And we'll talk about that when we get down to that part. So, and there are no commands that are not allowed when you're using the replication by programming. So let's go and look at the demo for that. Okay, here is the replication by programming. And each button is one of those commands. So let's clear the results here. And the first step you do is an open, and this is just what the value that command returns. And then you can, replic info has some options that return true or false based on, and this one is for whether they exist. And according to PCSoft, that just says that the replication file is there. It really doesn't tell you much. And I mean, this one, the initialized, that it exists is checking that the file is there. And it uses the same kind of files, but in a hidden way as the replication where you were transferring the replication files from country to country in the demo. Now, right here is the date that we can, for the cutoff. I'm going to set it to June 1st. And that parameter is passed to the replication by the replicate command. So if we run that, it says that it has now set the cutoff to June 1st. So only data that has a modified on after June 1st will be in the data. So, but that doesn't occur until you do the replic synchronize. And now there's 52 records, which showing up here. This table is the replicated data that the application is using. This table is the data on the server, and it shows all the data. And remember, this is the record that we modified with the other automatic one. And by the way, they actually can run concurrently. So now if we go in here and modify one of these dates, and let's say we make it February. Now that is before the cutoff date on this one. So it is still in the table until you do a synchronize. Now, that's part of the nice thing about the by programming, because once you have the replication open and it's initialized, then you can do replic synchronize anytime that you need to. So we will do it again, and interesting, it should have reduced the number of files. Again, it takes 2 calls. And this is some of the weird things about replication. You send a question to the tech support and say, well, how is this working? The answer always comes back saying how it works is a proprietary thing, and our policy is we don't explain how it works. So you do have to play around and make sure that it's doing what you think it is. One of the first times I used replication several years ago, I think in about version 15 or something like that, I made a small change to the application, and it wiped out all of the replicated data for all the schools. And fortunately, we had backups and we could restore it. But you do
Ouch.
have to know what you're doing. Yes?
Yeah, that had to hurt.
Yes. They were not real happy with me for that. But they only do inventory once a month, so we had plenty of time to recover it. So that gives you an idea how it works. And again, if you change the data here, if we go up here and refresh the table, now it has should have that one we modified, which was okay. Yeah, that's one of them there. But it changed the number, and if you change a value here, it's not going to show up over there because it's a different one, but it will show up here. So let's change. Oh, and if you change on the server, let's actually do it right on the server database itself. And we need to update this displayed table. And if we change this one is in one replication and not in the other. So let's change that where it sticks out. That's record number 4, and we've saved it. Now if we come over here, and this window refreshes the table whenever it gets focus control. So we should have seen, whenever we have to do our synchronization. Now, after we do the synchronize, that shows up. So the synchronization is kind of like it's doing one direction on the first synchronization and the other direction on the next one. But you can see that data changes in the master or in the replication. After you synchronize, they put them all equal. So it's a pretty nice process, and we'll look at a real application in a bit. Let's see if there's anything else I need to. But it does get confusing. One of the things that you need to do is you don't create the subscriber data files yourself. You let Replic initialize create those the subscriber classic databases, because it goes in and actually changes the indexes to have unique values so that it can do the replication. And like I said, one of the irritating things is they don't tell you how it really works. But we can look at the, let me bring this around. Okay, this is the replication. And we'll just look at the element code here. Where is the, oh, I've got the debugger going, so it's running. That's the other thing that I mentioned is I could not run in test mode for the automatic replication, but you can run in debug mode for the by programming replication. So let's just end the test, and we can look at the code. And if we look at all the elements, I use two connections in order to get the data access the data that's on the master and access the data that's the replication. This CNX local connection is the subscriber databases that are updated by the replication process. And then when I need to access the other data, I actually change. Here's where we refresh just look at the screen so it makes sense. This data table that is the master data, and this is the local data. The way I do that is by this little procedure that saves the current connection name, and then you change it to the master client server connection, execute the query for that table, and then if the connection is different, then you change it back. And that is just for the purpose of displaying this data concurrently. You wouldn't do that normally in your application. But if we go back over to the actual window and look at the commands, the nice thing about by programming replication is that you can tell it where the data location is. And let's go over here and just open the directory. And I told it to put it in this folder called classic data. Now in here is the required files for replication. Here is our WIR file, and let's look at this one because it's a little different. And in this case, the filter is by parameter. And if you remember, in the automatic, I could not figure out how a parameter to do it, so I had to hard code it in there. The implementation, when you do the Replic initialize, what it does is creates this folder. And then when you do the Replic info initialized, it checks to see if this folder exists. It's basically all it does. And if it exists, then it returns true. And if you look in here, These are all the SYN commands, the sync files. And if you go back and remember on the WD universal replication example, it was passing these SYN files back and forth and then processing them. With this programming, when you say Repli synchronize, it does that for you. And you don't mess with these files or it stops working. So, and this is the data, the local data that is updated by the synchronized process. So anyway, when you do the open, you tell it where the replication data should go with this parameter. And then you pass it just a replication name. And if we go back to that folder, the replication name is _ test replic. And that's used in the WIR file, that's used in this open command to link them together. And then the replic info, you can pass these parameters which say, is it initialized? Does it exist? And I don't remember what other ones they are. There's a couple others, I think. But these are the two that I use. Does it exist? If it doesn't exist, then you got to initialize it. If it's not initialized, you got to initialize it. And see that logic in a live case later. Here's where it passes the parameter. I check to make sure that there's, when you do the replica init button, it makes sure that the cutoff date is valid, and then it passes that string, and it has to be.
I have a question for you whenever.
Sure. Yeah.
Can you use replication on FTP directory?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
I think he's wanting to know if you can use FTP for the replication instead of.
For the universal replication in the example for that we looked at first, that's with WinDev, if you look in there, they explicitly say you can transfer those files with FTP, a shared directory, any way you can get it over the email. What you're doing is you're passing a replication file, the .syn file, to the subscriber or vice versa, and then they process that.
You have to manage that transport yourself. There's not.
Yes.
There's no way to. There's no screen where you configure use FTP and it's going to manage it for you, though.
No. In this case, by programming, you have to have a connection available to your master database, and that's in the WIR file. I think this is still open here. Nope, that's the sync. We'll go back and look. We'll go back and cover that. This is the WIR file. Now, part of the specifications in here is you say where the master database is. And this is a connection that it uses. So in my case, it's right on my machine, localhost, and that's the parameters. So if you're creating a new replication, let's just look at that. You give it a name. So let's just call it test 2. And now you can import the data definitions from your server, or you can use your analysis. If you do it this way, then you give it the parameters for how it can connect to the host. So you have to have a live connection when you do the synchronization. It doesn't have to be all the time your application's running, but only when you do the synchronize. And this connection information is stored in the .wr file, so it does that connection automatically for you. You do not have to do it. You work only with your local files until you're ready to synchronize, and then you have to have a connection. So if you're doing the synchronization, say, on laptops, and you want to work where you don't have a connection on your airplane flight or whatever, then you do all that, and then when you go back, and if you try to synchronize when you don't have the connection, it'll say, I can't connect to your server. It just gives you an error. Doesn't lose anything, it just gives an error. And when it can successfully connect to the master database, then it will complete the synchronization. And then you specify the database. In our case, it was the PC soft, and so forth. And you tell it, and then for each, this is the default I was talking about. The default you specify when you're creating the .wr file. You say, I want the default to be bidirectional or towards subscriber. And then you can override that. And this most recent has priority is what I found is if you want to do bidirectional, you should use the most recent has priority. Because if there was a change to the record on the master database and on your database, for example, in our application, the handheld can create a new barcode link to a product. Now, you have 6 schools out doing inventory all at the same time, and they could put in that same barcode to the same product, and it will handle this. It doesn't wipe anything out. If that's clear, hopefully. And now, when you add your data files, then, of course, we only have one in this case. Then you can say, I want all the records, or I want to filter the records. And normally, well, in real life, there's both, because like we want to know all the different measures, we want to know all the schools and so forth in our application. But then many of them you want to filter, and then you come in and say what field do you want to filter on, and do you want to use the parameter, and of course this is the standard all, and I usually use greater than or equal, and then I put in a new parameter and I define my parameter. So let's cancel out of this. We don't need to do not save. I hope that answers the question. So, but the Repli edit is the key tool for making your replication work the way you want. All right, let's go back to I think we covered everything here. Okay, now I've made references to the our application where we actually use the replication by programming, and a lot of the files, we pass all the data for the master to the subscriber, things that don't change but are used in the handheld application. Then some data goes only to subscriber but has to be filtered. Like they have a lot of inactive products from previous years' inventory, and you don't need those on your handhelds. So I filter products to say they are active. And then in our application, we have 2 data files that are bidirectional. And that's a file called cafeteria stock and one that's called barcodes. And like I was mentioning earlier, if they get a new product in, and it may be a different UPC on that product, that they could be multiple UPCs for the same product because it comes from a different manufacturer, but it's still the same product. Then they can link those 2 different barcodes to the same product. And I'm hoping that we can see that in when I demonstrate here. I used to, well, up until through this last school year, we ran the replication on the handheld device. That was really slow. And then when version 20 came out, I tried to upgrade that, and it always ran out of memory. They changed something. So I just went through and modified our application to copy the files from the Pocket PC onto the PC, run the replication there, and then copy the files back to the Socket mobile device. So let's actually, I don't want to run it live. I want to run it in test mode. Okay, we'll bring the project around here. Now, the reason I want to run it in test mode is because I put out some messages when we're in test mode. We do some extra steps. And here's the window that does the replication. And again, you see the open connection, and you may have to do this in your application. When you're doing the replication, you have to turn the integrity off because it does, one file at a time, and the linked file may not be there, or the linked file record it needs is not there. So you turn it off, and you do your synchronization, and then you turn it back on down at the end. Oh, I'm sure you can't read this code. Let's get this out of the way. And then it turns the integrity off, turns it back on better at the end. Okay, that's better, good. Jeff, thank you. So let's just run this real quick. And this again is a test mode. There's a lot of messages that come up because it's test mode. Now I'm using this login because it's a particular school that I had data for. So we log in as her, and then we go to the school inventory. Now, school inventory, let me explain that, it'll make more sense. The inventory that is maintained has 2 parts. You have the warehouse inventories, and there can be multiple warehouses. Most school districts have a single warehouse. And the supplies go in issue quantities from the main warehouse to the production kitchens. And the production kitchens have a supply of materials there. At the end of each month, they inventory those items in their production kitchen so they can get an accurate cost of the meals produced for a given month. And that's what we call the school inventory. So there's, well, I've got some kind of poor, okay. These are just WD captures of the handheld. And this is a case where they're out doing their inventory with the handheld that has a barcode scanner on it. And I didn't use a barcode scan. I just put this in by hand, put a number in that is not a valid barcode. And so when it gets a barcode that it doesn't recognize, it pops up the products for you to select what product that barcode applies to. Then the next time you scan it, it will be there. So in this case, I selected the black beans, and then I clicked on correct, and it then added it to the inventory. Sorry about that, moving stuff around there. So when it not only adds that barcode, but it also then adds that item to their inventory, and they have to say what their quantities are. The first step is the issue quantities, and that tells you it's a case. So in this case, I put in 1 case. And then the next step comes up and says, well, what about the school quantity? Warehouse does not keep things in school quantities. They don't keep individual cans. So to get an accurate cost, though, they have to know how many cans out of a given case they have remaining. So they enter in the school quantity. And then they're back to their inventory screen for the month. And in this case, we have 2 items, or 3 items now. One of them being the beans we just added. And if you look over at the school inventory in the PC application, it has only 1 item in it. So that was transferred previously. And so I've created this data offline. And now we're ready to do the synchronization. Now it's copying the files. Oh, this is part of my test. In order to test this, I had to be able to set the dates to not today, because I just also changed the mode of our synchronization date to be reset during the off period of the summer. So we used to reset it every 90 days, and every time you reset it, it took a long time to run initialization. So I've also changed it this year with this new approach to basically reset it to August 1st whenever you have a date after that day. So I'm saying today's date really is September 15, 2014 for testing purposes. Now, and before we do the synchron, then this doesn't show on when it's running live, but you can see there's 1,229 barcodes now and 4 cafeteria stock items. So once we close this, it continues on, and well, it's already done the synchronization. I was afraid of that. So anyway, and that's a no. And you can see that we did, oh yeah, that's another thing you get from Repli info is the date and time of your last synchronization. So then we started synchronization at this date, and then we've got a new synchronization date and time. But you can tell the synchronization is really fast. It'll be a little slower when the master database is not on the PC. But the replic initialize for that was running on the handheld would take 30 minutes sometimes, and that was very frustrating to them. So this new approach will be very useful. So, and now you see the two new items showed up here. There's the beans, and the new barcode is there. So, let's go back to our presentation. So, in summary, the assisted universal replication is most likely going to meet your needs for most applications. The automatic mode's okay for if you're doing peer-to-peer and there's a fixed connection. I did not like the automatic mode because you didn't really have enough control, and I never got if you get it to work where when you start the application it synchronizes, and then after you do whatever and when you exit it synchronizes again, that would be okay. But you get error messages from the Replic Synchro or the Replic admin utility, but it's not, I didn't like it as much as the program mode, and particularly with the WinDev mobile devices. You synchronize only when you need to, and you can synchronize multiple times without hurting anything. And I highly recommend that you make small test cases to verify how it works. And hopefully you speak French so you can read they have a PDF for replication that you can put in. And you can also Replic Synchro, which does the synchronization in automatic mode. That is an optional thing that you can install. So, any questions on replication?
We don't see any right now.
All right, I'd like to go back to the demonstration here, and let's run the replication one more time and change it to this year. And the reason for this is that we will see another step in the process, or we should. Like again, this has not been deployed yet. It's just been tested. Okay, what's it doing here? I'm not sure why it's taking so long there. Again, this is still in development. Well, that's what happens when you demonstrate with development. Thanks. Okay, that's all I have. And if anybody would like those little demo test cases, I'd be glad to share them. So that's, go ahead, Tim.
No questions I hear right now. And if you wish to share those, just send me a link to them, please, and I'll post them along with the video.
All right, will do. I'll put those two in a zip file and pass them to you.
Okay. Pete, anything before we end this webinar?
Yeah, Jeff was asking what I'm working on today is the new WinDev dynamic tab interface, and Jeff said he hadn't seen that yet, so thought I'd share real quick so everybody can kind of get a look at what that looks like.
Sure, yeah, we'll do this as a bonus.
Okay, let me get this, unshare my screen here. However, I have to do that.
Stop up in the top. Yeah.
Okay, that did it. I think.
It did.
All right.
All right, you're seeing my screen now, aren't you, Tim?
Yes.
All right, we had a class that was originally written by Born Pragmatics in this application, and with version 20, they've now included the native ability, and we switched everything over to use the native ability for the dynamic tabs. And basically what they are is so that your Windows interface can have that Chrome kind of look and feel. So you'll see as we open up these windows, they just become tabs on our main interface, and we can switch back and forth to them. If I click on one that's not currently the active one, I switch back over to it versus opening a new one. But where it really gets nice, and this is the new thing that you've got in 20, is all we got to do is grab that and pull it off, and it becomes a tearaway window that we can move over to one of our other monitors or do whatever we want to it, and we can also drop it back onto the interface and redock it. You can also move these around in what order that they're on your tab list. And this is all native stuff, so there's not a lot of coding involved. It's all in just how you open the window to open it into the dynamic tab.
Very
the
nice.
key to it all is your browse has to be an internal window, and that was my biggest challenge, was that our existing windows weren't internal windows. And I'll be doing a webinar at some point in the future, and I'll go over, hopefully now that folks will be using internal windows a little more with this feature, they'll incorporate some more features and stuff with internal windows. There's definitely some shortcomings with them right now. One of the biggest ones is you can't have a template for an internal window. You can have a template for a window, but not an internal window. And that means that, you know, I'd like to have a template for my browse with all my buttons and everything on it, and use that for all my internal windows. That way, if I ever change the look of the buttons and so forth, I could do it, reapply the template. Unfortunately, at this point, you can't do that. There's also some other shortcomings of being able to get the name of your internal window that's running, and a few other things that would definitely make life a little easier. So anyway, at some point in the future, I'll do a webinar. I've got a little class that the only thing that the class really is doing is keeping track of which ones are open, so that if I click on one, I can jump back over to that tab instead of reopening a new one. That's pretty much the only thing that the class has to manage. Everything else is being managed natively. So that'll be for a future webinar. Next week, I'm going to do breadcrumbs 3 ways. Oh wait, this isn't the cooking webinar, is it?
It can
actually,
be.
yeah, it's actually continuation of the CSS jQuery stuff that we've been doing. I will show 3 different styles of breadcrumb navigation done with CSS to give you that look and feel that's a little different than what you get out of the WinDev box.
They're good. And we just had a comment. Very good webinar from Louise. Thank you very much, Louise, for joining us.
Yeah, that was definitely covered a lot of ground, Jeff.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, that's a great feature, Pete. I'm looking forward to that webinar on your dynamic tabs.
I'm surprised that that class that you had to create to keep track of which ones were open is not part of the just a native feature.
Yeah, it's the only one of the only pieces missing is I guess they assume that if you click that button 3 times you would want to open 3 copies of it, which depending on what you're doing, that may be what you want to do. But
yeah, well,
in
PC
my
Soft,
instance, I don't want to do that.
Well, PC Soft, if you're watching, there's a suggestion for version 21.
Yeah,
and they do,
well,
as you all know.
I will have a list of things that I would like to see changed with internal Windows that would make life a little easier using these features, which I'm sure Andy will contribute because he is the internal window king. He's been using them since day one.
Yeah, and and I know that Glenn is he's watching right now. He's not where he can talk, but I know Glenn is raising his hand right now and going, ooh, 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 I am too. So we should have.
Yeah, this interface is very nice and clean. Like I said, we had already had this in our project using a class that what it was doing was moving the windows around to kind of make them look like they were in the tab, and it worked, but it was a lot of code. It would break occasionally, and you could, if you got 5 or 6 tabs open and you started moving things around, you could see the drag of the windows catching back up and so forth. And the native one is definitely much cleaner and smoother and a lot less code.
Very good. All right, gentlemen, it is 3 minutes past the hour. Do you have anything else from either one of you?
No, not from me.
Okay, well, thanks again, Jay.
Have a happy 4th.
Yeah, everybody, have a great weekend. Be safe.